The community center smelled of stale coffee and lemon cleaner, its fluorescent lights buzzing like a chorus of trapped flies. Jack Harlan leaned against the back wall, arms crossed, his badge glinting under the harsh glow. He hated these events, dog and pony shows, the chief called them. Build trust, they said, as if a folding table of donuts and a PowerPoint could erase the past year's headlines. Another shooting, another protest, another round of talking heads screaming about reform. Jack didn't make policy. He just did his job. The room was half full, maybe 50 people, mostly black and Latino. Faces, a few white ones sprinkled in like afterthoughts. They sat in metal chairs, murmuring, some glaring at the cops up front. Jack scanned the crowd, his cop's instinct cataloging details. The kid in the hoodie slouching low. The old man with a cane tapping impatiently the woman in the front row. Her gray braids neat as a schoolteacher's, her eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She was watching him. Not the chief, not the rookie handing out flyers. Him. Jack shifted his boots, scuffing the linoleum. He didn't like being seen. Not like that. Ladies and gentlemen, Chief Tate began, his voice booming like a preacher's, thank you for coming. We're here to listen to rebuild. Your voices matter. Jack snorted under his breath. Same script every time. He'd heard it in 22, after the riots in 24, after the chokehold case. Nothing changed. People didn't want to talk. They wanted blood, or so it felt on the street. He caught the woman's eye again, 60, maybe older, her posture straight as a ruler. She didn't look angry, just knowing, like she'd seen his kind before and wasn't impressed. The Q&A started and the room turned hostile fast. The kid in the hoodie stood, voice shaking. Why's it always us? Why's it always our brothers getting locked up? Shot up murmurs, rippled heads nodding. Tate gave his usual spiel, training, oversight, accountability. Jack tuned it out, his jaw tight. He wasn't the bad guy. He'd pulled kids out of gang fights, chased down dealers, kept the streets from eating themselves. But try telling that to this crowd. Then the woman with the braids stood. The room quieted like she carried weight. Chief Tate, she said, her voice clear, deliberate. I'm Esther Brooks. I taught school here for 30 years. I've seen your officers in my classroom, in my neighborhood. I've seen them do good, and I've seen them do harm. You talk about trust, but trust is earned. What are you doing, really doing, to make sure your people aren't just here for a paycheck or a power trip? The dig landed. Jack felt it in his gut, though he wasn't sure why. Tate fumbled, mentioning body cams and community boards. Esther sat, her gaze flicking to Jack again. He held it this time, a challenge. Who was she to judge him? She didn't know him. The event dragged on, questions turning to shouts. Tate sweating under the lights. When it ended, Jack slipped out the side door, craving air. The parking lot was dark, the August heat still clinging to the asphalt. He lit a cigarette, the smoke curling like a ghost. Those'll kill you, a voice said. He turned. Esther Brooks stood a few feet away, her purse tucked under her arm, her expression unreadable. Up close, she was striking high cheekbones, eyes that held history. Jack exhaled, dropping the cigarette and grinding it under his heel. Didn't peg you for a smoker's advocate, he said, voice gruff. Didn't peg you for a listener, she shot back. You stood there the whole time looking like you'd rather be anywhere else. He bristled. I was there, doing my job. Your job, she repeated like she was tasting the word. That includes staring down folks like they're suspects. Jack's face heated. You don't know me, lady, Esther, she corrected. And I know enough. Seen 100 like you in my classroom. Boys who think they're tough because they've got a badge or a chip on their shoulder. He laughed, sharp and bitter. You always this charming. Only when I'm right, she said, a faint smile tugging her lips. A shout cut through the lot, some kid from the event drunk or high yelling at another cop. Jack's hand went to his radio, but Esther moved faster, stepping toward the kid, her voice low and steady. Malik, go home. Ain't nothing here for you tonight. The kid blinked, deflated, and shuffled off. Jack stared, caught off guard. She'd handled it like it was nothing. You're good at that, he said almost grudgingly. Comes with the territory, she replied. You should try it sometime. Talking, not just glaring. He didn't answer, but something shifted like a crack in a wall. She nodded as if she'd made her point and walked toward her car. Jack watched her go, her silhouette sharp against the streetlights. He didn't know why, but he wanted to call her back, to say something, anything to keep her there. Instead, he lit another cigarette and told himself it didn't matter. Jack's cruiser idled at the corner of Maple and 17th, the radio crackling with routine calls, petty theft, domestic dispute, nothing worth his time. The neighborhood was quiet tonight, porch lights flickering on modest bungalows, kids' bikes strewn across lawns. It wasn't his usual beat, but he'd been here before, back when a drug bust went south and left 2 dealers in cuffs. That was years ago. Felt like yesterday. He shouldn't be here now. He knew it, felt it in the tightness of his chest, the way his fingers drummed the steering wheel. But Esther Brooks' address was burned into his brain, pulled from the precinct's community outreach list, like a thief snatching a wallet. 1423 Maple Street. Her house was just ahead, a neat one-story with a rose bush out front, the kind of place that screamed, "I've lived through worse than you." Jack cut the engine, the silence heavy. He told himself this was work. Community engagement like the chief wanted. Never mind that it was 8 p.m., that he was off duty, that Lila was probably pacing their apartment, wondering why he hadn't called. Never mind that Esther's face, those eyes that half smile, had been stuck in his head for 3 days. He stepped out, adjusting his jacket to cover the badge clipped to his belt. The air was thick summer, refusing to let go. A dog barked somewhere, sharp and distant. Jack walked up the path, his boots loud against the cracked concrete, and knocked before he could talk himself out of it. The door opened, and there she was. Esther in a simple green blouse and slacks, her braids pulled back. She didn't look surprised, just raised an eyebrow like she'd been expecting him to do something foolish. "Detective Harlan," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "This ain't the community center." "Jack," he corrected, then regretted it. "Too familiar. I was in the area. Thought I'd follow up. You know, after the other night." "Follow up," she echoed, her tone dry as dust. "You always make house calls for old ladies who talk too much?" He shifted, caught off guard. "You didn't talk too much. You said what you meant. Most people don't." She studied him, her gaze peeling back layers he didn't want exposed. Then she stepped aside. "Come in then, but don't expect me to make you coffee." The living room was warm, cluttered with history, a bookshelf stuffed with novels and photo albums, a quilt draped over a worn sofa, framed pictures of a younger Esther with kids who must have been her students. Jack stood awkwardly, hands in his pockets, feeling like an intruder. "Sit," Esther said, pointing to a chair. She took the sofa, crossing her arms. "So what's this really about? You ain't here to talk police reform." He opened his mouth, closed it. The truth was, he didn't know why he was here. "Not exactly. You got under my skin," he admitted finally. "The way you handled that kid Malik. The way you talked to Tate, like you weren't afraid of anything." Esther's laugh was low, almost bitter. "Afraid? Oh, I've been afraid plenty. Grew up in this city when folks like you didn't knock polite. Watched my brother get hauled off for nothing but walking home. Fear's an old friend. You just learn to stare it down." Jack's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to say he wasn't like that, but the words stuck. Instead, he said, "You think I'm the problem. I think you're part of it," she said, not unkindly. "You walk in a room, people tense up, not 'cause you're Jack Harlan, but 'cause of that badge. You ever think about what that means?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I think about keeping people safe, about getting home at night. You think it's easy out there. Half the calls I get, someone's got a gun, a knife, a reason to hate me before I open my mouth, and you think that gives you a pass." Esther's voice was steady, but there was fire in it. "You think because it's hard you get to look at folks like me and see trouble first." Jack's face heated. "I don't." He stopped because he did. He'd done it 1,000 times, sized up a crowd, a street, a face, and made a call. Black kid in a hoodie, trouble. Old lady with braids, safe but mouthy. It was instinct honed by 20 years on the job, and it was wrong, he realized, sitting there under her gaze. "I don't know," he said finally, the admission heavy. "I don't know how to see it different." Esther's expression softened, just a fraction. "That's a start," she said. "Most don't even get that far." They talked for an hour, the conversation weaving between tense and easy. She told him about teaching, about the kids she'd fought for, the ones she'd lost. He told her about the job, about the nights he couldn't sleep, the faces that stayed with him. Not the whole truth he didn't mention, the times he'd looked the other way, the assumptions he'd never questioned, but enough to feel raw, exposed. When he left, the night was cooler, the stars sharp. Esther stood in the doorway watching him go. "Don't come back unless you mean it," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Mean what?" he asked, turning. "Whatever this is," she said, and closed the door. Jack drove home, the city a blur, her words echoing. He didn't know what he meant, but he knew he'd be back. The precinct was a pressure cooker, phones, ringing radios, squawking the air thick with coffee and sweat. Jack sat at his desk staring at a report he hadn't touched in an hour. His mind was elsewhere. 1423 Maple Street, Esther's living room, the way her voice had cracked when she talked about her brother. He'd gone back twice since that first visit, each time telling himself it was nothing, just talk. But it wasn't nothing. Not anymore. Harlan Chief Tate's voice snapped him out of it. "You def got a call on Elm Street vandalism. Take Rodriguez and handle it." Jack nodded, grabbing his keys. Rodriguez, a rookie with a chip on his shoulder, was already waiting by the cruiser. "You good man?" Rodriguez asked, eyeing him. "You've been off lately." "I'm fine," Jack growled, climbing in. He wasn't fine. Lila had barely spoken to him all week, her silences louder than any fight. He'd come home late too many nights muttering about overtime. She didn't buy it. He didn't blame her. The vandalism call was a bust, kids tagging a corner store gone before they arrived. Jack took statements, his mind half-present, Esther's face flashing in his head. Rodriguez noticed, smirking. "What's got you so distracted, Harlan? Got a side piece or something?" Jack's fist clenched, but he forced a laugh. "Keep dreaming, kid." The joke landed wrong, too close to the truth. He drove back to the precinct, dropped Rodriguez off, and headed to Maple Street without thinking. It was past 9 p.m. when he knocked on Esther's door. She opened it, her expression a mix of exasperation and something softer. "You don't listen, do you?" she said, but she let him in. This time they didn't sit. They stood in her kitchen, the light soft from a single bulb. She poured him water, her fingers brushing his as she handed him the glass. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low. "You know that." "I know," he said, setting the glass down. "But I can't stop thinking about you." She laughed, sharp and incredulous. "You're married, Jack, and I'm not some fool girl chasing trouble." "I'm not asking you to be," he said, stepping closer. I don't know what I'm doing. But I know I feel something." Esther's eyes searched his, and for a moment he thought she'd push him away. Tell him to leave and not come back. Instead, she stepped closer, her hand resting on his chest, not pushing, just feeling. "This is a mistake," she whispered. "Maybe," he said, and kissed her. It was slow at first, tentative, like they were both waiting for the world to stop them. Then it deepened, her hands in his hair, his arms around her. The weight of everything, his badge, her past, their differences falling away. When they pulled back, breathless, Esther's eyes were wet. "This can't happen again," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It will," Jack said, and he meant it. He left before either of them could say more, the night swallowing him as he drove. His phone buzzed, Lila asking where he was. He didn't answer. Across town, Marcus Brooks sat in his mother's driveway, having seen Jack's cruiser pull away. His jaw was tight, his hands gripping the wheel. He didn't know everything, but he knew enough. And in the precinct, Rodriguez filed a report noting Jack's unusual behavior in passing. Just a line, nothing serious. Yet, the motel on Route 17 was a relic, its neon sign flickering vacancy like a tired heartbeat. Jack pulled his cruiser into the lot, parking in the shadow of a sagging awning. The place was a dive, peeling paint curtains stained with years of neglect. But it was discreet, far from the precinct's prying eyes and the city's gossip. He checked his phone, 10:03 p.m. Esther would be here soon. Inside room 12, the air smelled of mildew and cheap air freshener. Jack paced his boots, scuffing the threadbare carpet. 3 weeks since that first kiss in her kitchen, and he was in deep, too deep. Every stolen moment with Esther felt like a drug, sharpening his senses, dulling his guilt. Lila's face flashed in his mind, her tired eyes searching his over dinner last night. He'd lied again, said he was working late. The truth was heavier than he could carry. A soft knock. Jack opened the door and Esther slipped inside, her coat dappled with rain. Her braids were loose tonight, framing her face like a halo. She didn't smile, just looked at him, her eyes holding a mix of hunger and regret. "This is reckless," she said, shedding her coat. "You know that." "I know," Jack said, closing the distance. He kissed her slow and deliberate, tasting the rain on her lips. She leaned into him, her hands gripping his shirt, and for a moment the world was just them. No badge, no past, no consequences. They fell onto the bed, the springs creaking under their weight. It wasn't just physical, though. That was electric. It was the way she looked at him, like she saw the man he could be, not the one he was. Afterward, they lay tangled in the sheets, her head on his chest, the rain drumming outside. "Tell me something real," she said, her voice soft. "Something you don't tell anyone." Jack hesitated. He could have brushed it off, made a joke, but her warmth demanded truth. "I'm scared," he admitted. "Every day on the job, I'm waiting for the call that ends me. Or worse, the one where I screw up, hurt someone who didn't deserve it. I've seen it happen. Guys like me thinking they're right, and then—" Esther propped herself up, her gaze piercing. "You ever hurt someone who didn't deserve it?" His throat tightened. "Not like that. Not directly. But I've looked the other way. Let things slide. Assume things about people like you." The words burned, but they were true. He'd profiled, cut corners, trusted his gut when his gut was steeped in bias. She didn't flinch, just nodded. "That's more than most admit," she said. "My turn. I'm scared too. Scared of what this does to me, to my family. Marcus, my son, he's got his own life, but he worries. If he knew about us—" She trailed off her fingers, tracing the scar on Jack's knuckles. "Then why do this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because I'm tired of being careful," she said, fierce. "Tired of living for everyone else. You make me feel alive, Jack. That's worth something." They talked until midnight, sharing fragments of their lives, her teaching days, his childhood in a trailer park, the way the city had changed them both. Each word felt like a brick laid in a fragile bridge between them. But outside, the world was watching. At the precinct, Rodriguez nudged his partner Murphy as Jack's cruiser log showed another patrol on the west side, nowhere near his assigned route. "Harlan's up to something," Rodriguez said, half joking. Murphy, older and sharper, made a mental note to keep an eye out. And in Esther's neighborhood, Marcus Brooks drove by his mother's house, slowing when he saw her car gone again. He didn't know where she was, but he knew it wasn't book club or church. His gut twisted a lawyer's instinct for trouble. Jack left the motel first, kissing Esther at the door. "Tomorrow?" he asked. She hesitated, then nodded. "Tomorrow." He drove into the night, the rain blurring his windshield, unaware that the cracks in their secrecy were starting to show. Esther's kitchen smelled of cinnamon and coffee, the morning light slanting through lace curtains. She stood at the counter, slicing apples for a pie, her movements precise despite the storm in her head. Last night at the motel had been a mistake, not the act, but the recklessness. She'd seen the way Jack's eyes darted to the window, the way her own heart raced when a car passed too slowly. They were playing with fire, and she wasn't sure she could stop. The front door opened, and Marcus strode in, his suit crisp, his expression tight. "Mama," he said, kissing her cheek. "You got a minute?" "For you, always," she said, forcing a smile. But her stomach nodded. Marcus had her eyes, her knack for seeing through lies. He sat at the table, loosening his tie, and she braced herself. "You've been out a lot lately," he said, casual but pointed. "Late nights. Not like you." Esther kept slicing the knife steady. "I'm retired, not dead. Got a life to live." "I know," he said, leaning forward. "But I saw that cop's car here again. Harlan, what's he want with you?" Her hand slipped the knife, nicking her finger. She cursed softly, grabbing a towel. "He's doing outreach," she said, the lie thin. "Police trying to make nice after all the mess last year." Marcus's eyes narrowed. "Outreach don't happen at 9 p.m. Mama, I checked him out. He's got a rep, rough, bends the rules. You don't need that kind of trouble." Esther met his gaze, her voice firm. "I can handle my own trouble, Marcus. Been doing it since before you were born." He softened, but only slightly. "I just don't want you hurt. Not after everything." She knotted her throat tight. Marcus didn't know the half of it, and she wasn't ready to tell him. He left soon after promising to check in, and Esther stood alone, the apple pie forgotten. She loved her son, but this Jack, the motel, the thrill was hers. Across town, Jack was losing ground. Murphy had been tailing him, not officially, just curious. That morning he'd seen Jack's cruiser parked near Route 17, far from his beat. Murphy wasn't a snitch, but he was loyal to the chain of command. At the precinct, he mentioned it to Rodriguez over coffee. Harlan sneaking around, he said. Might be nothing. Might be something. Rodriguez grinned, sensing gossip. Told you he's got a side piece. Bet it's some barmaid. Murphy didn't laugh. He'd seen Jack's distraction, the way he flinched when Chief Tate asked about his patrol logs. Just keep it quiet, Murphy said. For now. But quiet didn't last. By lunch, whispers were circulating, nothing concrete, just enough to make Jack's skin crawl when he walked into the locker room. He caught Rodriguez's smirk, ignored it, and focused on his shift. A robbery call on the east side kept him busy, but Esther was never far from his thoughts. That night they met again, this time at her house, the Motel 2 Risky. The air was thick with unspoken fears, but they didn't talk about Marcus or the precinct. They made love on her couch, urgent and desperate, as if time was running out. Afterward, Jack traced the lines of her face, memorizing them. People are starting to talk, he said finally. At work. Don't know how much they know. Esther's jaw tightened. Let them talk. They don't own us. But they both knew better. The city was a tinderbox, and their secret was a match. The call came at 3 a.m., shattering the fragile peace of Jack's night. He was at Esther's, her head on his shoulder, when his radio crackled. All units disturbance at 23rd and Pine. Possible B&E. Esther stirred, her eyes heavy with sleep, and he kissed her forehead before slipping out. The scene was chaos when he arrived. A corner store, its windows smashed glass glittering under streetlights. A crowd had gathered, phones out, recording. Rodriguez was already there, wrestling a black teenager to the ground, the kid's hoodie torn. Stay down, Rodriguez shouted, knee on the kid's back. Jack's gut twisted. The kid couldn't be more than 16, was yelling, I didn't do nothing. The crowd was louder, curses flying, someone screaming about police brutality. Jack waded in, pulling Rodriguez off. Ease up, he snapped, cuffing the kid himself, gentler but firm. The kid's eyes met his wide with fear and fury. You're all the same, he spat. Jack didn't answer, but the words hit like a fist. He hauled the kid to the cruiser, the crowd's shouts ringing in his ears. By the time backup arrived, the scene was a powder keg, protesters chanting, a bottle shattering nearby. At the precinct, the kid's name was DeAndre Carter. No priors, just a scared kid caught in the wrong place. The store owner wasn't pressing charges, but the arrest was already viral, shaky phone footage spreading on X. Jack watched the clip on his phone, his own face grim as he cuffed DeAndre. He looked like the villain. Esther called at dawn, her voice tight. Saw the news. That you? Yeah, Jack said, rubbing his eyes. It wasn't what it looked like. Never is, she said, and hung up. He went to her house that evening, uninvited, desperate to explain. She let him in, but her arms were crossed, her face a mask. You didn't have to cuff him, she said. Kid was scared, not dangerous. I was doing my job, Jack said, defensive. You think I wanted that crowd was ready to riot? I had to control it. Control, she repeated, bitter. That's what it's always about, ain't it? Controlling us. The word stung and Jack's temper flared. Us. You think I see you like that? After everything you tell me, she shot back. You're still out there acting like every black kid's a threat. You think that don't bleed into this? She gestured between them. He wanted to argue, to say she was wrong, but DeAndre's face stopped him. He'd assumed the kid was guilty, hadn't he? Just for a second, long enough to act. I'm trying, he said finally, his voice raw. I don't know how to fix this. Esther's eyes softened, but she didn't touch him. You don't fix it, Jack. You live with it, and you choose what comes next. She asked him to leave, and he did, the weight of her words crushing. Outside the city simmered protest signs sprouting on street corners. Jack drove past, one justice for DeAndre scrawled in red. He didn't stop. Esther sat in her garden, the late September air, crisp roses fading on their stems. She hadn't seen Jack in 3 days, not since the fight. Part of her wanted to call to bridge the gap, but another part, the part that had survived Jim Crow police raids, a lifetime of slights, knew better. Loving Jack was a rebellion, but it wasn't salvation. He had to change, or this was just pain dressed up as passion. Her phone buzzed, Marcus checking in. He'd been calling more, his suspicion sharpening. She kept her answers vague, but the guilt gnawed. She wasn't just risking her heart, she was risking her place in the community, the respect she'd earned over decades. Jack showed up unannounced, his face, haggard eyes shadowed. I need to talk, he said, standing on her porch. She let him in against her better judgment, and they sat at her kitchen table, the silence heavy. I can't stop thinking about that kid, Jack said. DeAndre. I keep seeing his face. I didn't mean to. I thought I was doing right. Esther watched him, her heart torn. You thought what you were taught to think, she said. That's the problem, Jack. You don't see it till it's staring you down. He leaned forward, desperate. Then help me see. I don't want to be that guy. She took a breath and told him a story she rarely shared. When I was 19, she said, cops raided our street. Looking for some dealer, they said. Dragged my brother James out of our house. He was 17, studying for college. They beat him in the yard, called him names I won't repeat. No charges, no apology. He never was the same after. That's what your job does when it's blind. Jack's face crumpled, shame and anger warring in his eyes. I'm not them, he said, but it sounded weak. You're part of it, she said, gentle but firm. You want to change. Go to the community center. Not as a cop, as a man. Listen. Learn. Or this, she pointed between them. It's done. He nodded, the weight of her challenge settling. I'll try, he said. For you. Not for me, she corrected. For you. They didn't touch. Didn't kiss. Jack left and Esther sat alone, wondering if she'd pushed him too far or not far enough. Across town, Jack drove to the community center, his heart pounding. The next meeting was tomorrow. He'd go not in uniform, just himself. It was a start. But at the precinct, Murphy was waiting, his eyes cold. We need to talk, Harlan, he said, about Route 17. And who you're meeting there?